Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the August Bear Paws. This month we have Dr. Jennifer Fish Ferguson, who will speak to us today about National Wellness Month.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for asking me to speak. Wellness is something that I'm pretty passionate about and something that I feel we should be talking about, especially right before the school year starts again. First slide, please. So let's talk all about the wellness. Well, there are 8 dimensions of wellness that we recognize. Sometimes people say 6 or 7, but when you look at most wellness websites, leaders in the industry tend to say that there are 8. Today, I will be covering 4 of them because the other 4 I'm not quite fluent enough to speak about just yet, but they are definitely items that will be showcased through the CTL this fall and winter semester. So there is more to come. This is just our first step into the foray of talking about wellness. Next slide. So getting real right with yourself. You can see Buddha's quote, but making sure that you are whole and healthy in all aspects of your life is a pretty full-time job. I often joke that people should be sponsored to be their best them that they can be, because making sure that you are emotionally well, mentally well, financially well, occupationally well, can take some extra work, can take a little bit of extra time, but it's an investment into your whole self and whole being that should be taken. Next slide, please. So when we think about wellness, we talk a lot lately about mental health awareness and that type of wellness. It's a little more encompassing than just that. Wellness, like your body, is an entire unit. So, where you can't separate your foot from your ear and expect your body to work properly, you can't take wellness on just one aspect and expect the rest of your life to run really well. So, when we talk about wellness, we're going to bring the focus in to my wheelhouse areas, which are physical, mental a little bit, but we're going to talk about the mental health program that is offered through Mott. We have social, that interconnected that we need to have with each other, which the pandemic did a really good job of fragmenting for us, and emotional wellness. A lot of times people think that the old saying of keep a stiff upper lip, keep your emotions in check is actually the way to be. It has some ramifications. So as we explore this topic of wellness, if you have questions, please feel free to email me at ctl@mcc.edu. And hopefully I will either have the answers or I can help you find some of the answers to the questions that you have. Next slide, please. So here are the 4 areas. Again, mental, social, emotional, and physical. These are the 4 that I will cover today. Again, there are 8 topics in total, but given our time constraints and given the depth that goes into each of them, I've chosen to only work with 4 of them. Next slide, please. So physical. So for the people on campus that are familiar with me, this is probably the aspect of wellness that people know that I know about. So talking about physical wellness. So my background as a fitness instructor is I'm a yoga teacher. I also train yoga students. So new people who would like to teach yoga, I also train them. I teach Zumba. I teach work, which is a different form of dance fitness. I teach Strong Nation and Body Combat, which are high intensity programs. I teach bar. And then I also teach many of those formats in the pool. So I do aqua versions of them. So most people know that about me. And if you didn't, now you do. But physical wellness is something that really and truly became near and dear to me about 11 years ago. And not that I wasn't an active child and did all of those things, but after having gone through grad school, and having a couple of kids and having some episodes with anxiety, I found that I started to gain weight because that was my coping mechanism. And I know a lot of people talk about emotional eating or try to hide emotional eating, but that was the reality of my situation. And 11 years ago, I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. And it was at that time where my kids were playing tennis. I decided, okay, I'm going to try to be active. And so I just went out and hit tennis balls every day. And I started to notice the days that I went out and I started to become active, I felt better, not just physically, but my thoughts were clearer. I wasn't nearly as anxious. I just had a better handle on life. So I said, okay, then we're going to continue this foray into the exercise world. And so I started with Zumba. I like dancing. I figure I can do this. And when I went into class, I hid in the back corner because everybody else looked way more fit than I did. And so I said, okay, we're going to keep in mind this one class, burn it into your memory. And every 3 minutes, I was dying. I had to stop to the back. I had to take a drink of water. I was hot. I was very grouchy. But it definitely rung incorrectly that you're out of shape. Let's get something done. And I progressed from there. Physical wellness takes a special toll for us. So it's not just about getting into the gym and releasing endorphins. It's about the ability to do the things that you would like to be able to do. Everybody's got different limitations. Everybody has different abilities, but taking some time and initiative to move, whether it's walking, for the people who enjoy running, that's not me. I run through O'Hare Airport, and that's about it. But there are plenty of different ways. And I found that when I stopped to actually make time to do these things, I felt better. I was a better person. I was a better parent. And so that became part of the routine of my life. It does help you stay in shape. It helps you with your blood pressure. It helps with weight maintenance to a degree. It depends on what you do. But physical wellness bleeds into other areas of your life. So when you are physically active, you sleep better. When you're physically active, you metabolize better. So there are absolute health benefits to coming in to being physical. And I know a lot of times I'm asked at the gym because many longtime members have watched me transform. They've watched how I started and what I do now. They noticed that I came in as a member and now I'm an instructor. And a lot of times I get the question, well, number one, how much weight did you lose? I have no idea. I step on the scale backwards. I never wanted it to be about a number. I wanted it to be about how I felt. And then number two, the other question is, well, how do you do this? And my answer irritates most people because it's the honest one, which is I made it a point to show up every day. I showed up on the days that I didn't want to be there. I especially showed up on the days I didn't want to be there. I made sure that I was modeling for my children what a healthy lifestyle could look like, and that involved movement. So showing up is the first one, it's the hardest one. And then continuing to do it gets a little easier over time. And at this point in my life, I can say, I actually enjoy it. I feel better after I work out, especially if it's in a class. So during the pandemic, I taught fitness classes online. And I can tell you there is a huge difference in taking a class with a group of people that are in there sweating with you versus taking it online. There's a little bit more camaraderie. So I encourage everybody, find the type of physical activity that you can stick with. Next slide, please. And I give you a whole bunch of bullet points. I will happily share this slide with everybody. One thing that I've never appreciated is a presenter reading slides, so I try my very best not to do it. But taking these bullet points and looking at the benefits of not just working out, but tracking your workouts. One of the things that it helps you is to create variety. I know quite a few people who will take, they'll run track, for example. They'll go and they'll do their run and they run the same route every single time. Part of the problem with that is your brain shuts off and you do like to be a little mentally active along with your physicality. So tracking your workout helps. It also helps when you track workouts to see where you need to add things in. So we laugh at the gym. There are two types of people. There are the cardio people. Hi, that's me. And there are the people who like to lift weights. No, I don't enjoy it, but I do it. It's a necessity to keep myself physically healthy. And one thing that I learned from my doctor, who is a lovely, lovely human, but she tells me things I don't like to hear quite often, is that as I was getting older, because apparently I can't stay 20 the rest of my life, I have to be able to lift 20 pounds over my head. So a 20-pound dumbbell up over my head for at least 60 seconds. And then she explained, because I always ask her to explain, that if you fall when you get older, being able to lift your weights 20 pounds over your head for at least that 60 seconds means you have enough strength to push yourself up to a seated position. So that made sense to me. I continue to lift weights very begrudgingly. Next slide, please. Social wellness. Wow, have we taken a hit? The pandemic did us zero favors in terms for our social wellness. We learned that being isolated has negative effects. Definitely that. But the other thing that's talked about, but maybe not enough, is the impacts that coming back together has had with people as well. When you live in isolation, or you don't talk to as many people, or you don't interact with a variety of people, it is much easier for you to become hair triggered about events that are being talked about. People have lost the patience to sit and listen to other people's opinions. People have lost the active listening skill, which is listening to understand someone's point of view versus listening to respond, to very different ways of listening. And people just aren't nearly as social. There are necessarily less conversations when you see somebody in a grocery store or another type of store. Not It's coming back, but still there aren't as many groups that are going out and walking together or running together. But as we notice, restaurants are starting to fill up again. Social outings such as sporting events and different games are filling up again. Social wellness is huge. And as a person, I know I just got done telling you how much exercise I do at the gym, but I introvert really, really well. I do. I don't mind being by myself. It's quiet sometimes. It's great. And I found that I actually had to work at being social again after the pandemic. I had to think about saying yes to going out with my friends, by the way. It's not like a group of strangers, but even still, it takes some energy to go out and interact with people. And when we come into these social aspects, I think at certain points, what we're seeing is people have become very introspective about how they feel. And if you don't align exactly 100% with their thoughts, values, morals, they figure they can't talk to you anymore. So we have lost a way of talking to each other that says, I understand we're different people. We're not always going to like the same things, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a common meeting point. And I can respect you as an adult to have a different opinion. We've lost that ability in our communities, in our country, and it's one that we really need to examine. Because again, when we model for younger children, younger teenagers, young adults, we're not giving them the skill sets to actually be able to cope. Because in the real world, if you don't like what somebody has as an opinion, it's not an event that's worthy of you yelling, you cussing them out, losing your temper, and causing a scene because somebody doesn't think like you. Because at the end of the day, everyone is an individual. Nobody thinks like us. That's what makes us who we are. So when we start to look at social wellness, things that really should be changing, that the online world has divorced from us a little bit. And I'm going to bring it to our campus here because we're slowly coming back to campus, but there aren't as many meetings anymore that are necessarily face to face. We don't have random gatherings to do things together as much. Don't let me say never, because we do a really great job with Welcome Back Week and interacting. But the ability to come to a division meeting with your peers or have a meeting with your colleagues shouldn't necessarily have to be the convenience of being online. Instead, we should look toward bringing people back in a collaborative effort. Next slide, please. Emotional wellness. This is going to be a huge one. So for our emotional wellness, one of the amazing things that we as employees from Mott Community College, if you're an outsider watching, I'm sorry, I can't talk to your insurance, but we actually have a really great mental health program that we have access to. We are allowed to work with a variety of different therapists about different things. And working on our emotional wellness helps us figure out where we fit in ourselves, where we fit in our jobs, where we fit in our communities. But it also helps us cope with the things that are distressing that, quite frankly, as humans, we should emotionally process. Earlier, I alluded to that saying, keep a stiff upper lip and not displaying emotion. And especially for our young males, there's this huge stigma about men supposed to not show their emotions, which having a son, I have a problem with. I expect my child to experience the full range of emotions, even when that's anger at me because I've done something not fair in his eyes. But emotional wellness is one that people don't talk about as much anymore. Even within certain friend groups that I have, talking about, somebody will say, oh, I have a bad day. And people move right on like, oh, well, I guess that's you, instead of stopping and checking in. Sometimes the best things you can do for your friends is just check in. How's your day? How are you doing? Casual conversations that could be had. And if someone is telling you that you're close to, I know there are people who like to go out and dump on strangers. That's not me. But if I'm having a bad day, I want my friends to show up for me. And fortunately, I have friends who do. When they show up for me, it means I can show up for them. I can show up for my family. When I was actively teaching, I could show up for my students. Now that I work in my position with the CTL, it allows me to show up for faculty and their needs in a very different way. But emotions aren't something we should have to squash down and not process. You only get so far by squishing everything down. So, one thing that I like to say in my household is therapy is for everybody. Absolutely. It doesn't make you a lesser person. I know there was a stigma for a while about having your head shrunk and having to talk to a therapist. Emotional wellness comes when you feel comfortable with the experiences that you're having. So when something traumatic happens to you, there's nothing wrong with talking to a therapist. One of the biggest workshops that I have been running over the last 3 to 4 years is trauma-informed teaching. We deal with a lot of students, a lot of members of the community that come onto Mott's campus that have undergone some type of trauma. And then I can blanket everybody by saying we went through a pandemic. It had ramifications. So in the workshop, I have been working with, I did a workshop here for our faculty. I worked with Macomb Community College and Grand Rapids Community College to do the same workshops. And part of that is starting to recognize what the signs of trauma look like, not just in a face-to-face classroom, but also in online spaces because we have so many online students. And really working with people to understand that emotional distress is crippling, and it can be crippling. And it has students or other people behaving in ways that they would not otherwise. So understanding emotional wellness is huge. Understanding your emotional quotient. So we understand your IQ, but understanding your EQ and how you respond to different emotional outpourings is another skill set that people have to work to learn. Yes, it's good to have empathy toward people, but you also have to have enough of a presence to keep people from not necessarily just dumping on you, but getting caught in that circle of I'm hopeless and nothing can go on. We have to be able to guide people toward the resources that help them get their feet underneath them again. And then this concept of toxic traits. So we hear it a lot in terms of toxic masculinity. That's the big one that I hear bandied about on the internet a lot, or toxic environments. So when you are around people and everybody's toxic. And the first question I often remind people to ask is, are they being toxic, or do you disagree with what they're saying? We get in the habit of using a lot of buzzwords. Our language is forever changing, which, as an English instructor, fills me with both trepidation and joy. It's great to see that language is fluid and it moves, and we gain some really fun words like yeet, which my children told me I was never to say again, so I continually use it. But it also means that people pick up on buzzwords like things being triggers. Somebody having a difference of opinion with you shouldn't necessarily be a trigger unless they're directly attacking you. But in terms of emotional wellness and word choice and language, when you start to empathize with people, are you sympathizing with them? Are you taking to heart the things that they have said? Or are you indulging them to come into this recursive circle where they actually can't step out of the emotional distress into emotional wellness because your support is actually encouraging the downward spiral? Not to say that this lands in everybody's lap just as one person. You are not responsible for the well-being of others, but I like to bring up that point because sometimes we get really comfortable hearing about somebody else's bad day. And whether it's because you like to be that supportive person, or it's because you've had a bad day and now you feel better that somebody else is having a bad day, sometimes we can gain very unhealthy attachments to the emotions of others. So just keeping in mind as we work with our EQ, it's good to empathize with people. It's good to put yourself as a support system for your friends. It's good to look at the opposite side of events that you may not necessarily agree with. That's understanding, that's keeping your knowledge up. It's not okay to feed off the pain of others as they spiral around you and don't do anything with it. Our emotional wellness is impacted a lot. It looks at the support systems we have. So obviously, less support systems, emotional wellness is a little bit more difficult to have. It looks at our home life. A lot of times, people have home lives that they feel stymied or they feel stuck in. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's abusive. It doesn't mean that it's an absolute horrible environment, but sometimes doing the day to day without any noticeable change begins to wear on people's emotion. And then they do start to feel stuck and they don't feel like necessarily their purpose is being attained. So your environmental factors play a huge impact on your emotions. And I'm hoping people have heard about that from before me, um, before this instance. But one thing I tell people, especially people around me, if my office is messy, my brain is messy. And if my brain is messy, I am not bringing my best A game to the job. And that means I am failing people who count on me to provide certain things for them. That's me personally. So what that impetus does is I understand my emotions are attached 100% to how my environment looks. And that's important to me. It's also attached to the well-being of my family. Am I providing the things I need to provide for my family? Are their needs being met? That hits me emotionally. Of course, we want the best for the people around us. All of that to say, I encourage you on your own, maybe journal, do a deep dive someday. Really sit down and think about these different wellness areas of your life. Um, are you physically active and how do you feel about it? How are your emotions doing? Do you need to have what I call a tune up? with your therapist or finding a therapist to talk through an issue that maybe you didn't think was a big issue, but as you stop and think about it, has things that you would like to change about it. I will always encourage people to journal because I'm a writing teacher, but also because there is a lot of power in the written word, and especially when it's coming from your hand and nobody else has to read it, nobody else gets to read it, you can let your truths out. And sometimes our emotional well-being is tied up into the truths that we keep to ourselves. Next slide, please. Mental health, very tied with emotional health, very tied with social health. We talk around mental health a lot. So again, this is where I'm going to remind Mott employees, we have lovely benefits that do include mental health services. I am not going to stand here today and try to give anybody any tools to judge mental health. That is not my job. My job here is to make you aware or perhaps encourage you to check in with your own mental health. How are you doing? Are some of the best words that you can hear from another person. How are you doing today? Our mental health is an ever-evolving landscape of what's going on in our lives. And as we work with people and we come back together as a community, one of the biggest things that I was ever taught in my life is there is a lot of pain behind people who smile. So we don't necessarily know what's going on with other people. And when we stop seeing to our own mental health, we're not able to show up for others. And sometimes it requires sitting down and talking with somebody. Sometimes it requires getting certain tools to put in a toolkit so you can cope with certain things. And sometimes you just have to work through the process. Not everything is going to come to us easily. It's great when we have the days where everything is rainbows, but having to deal with anxiety, I can tell you, there are days that I wish there was some easy way to work through the process, the stress of acknowledging what sets off my emotions and my anxiety. And if there was a light switch I could flick and change it, I would. That's not how it works. I encourage people, encourage you listening, and I'm going to encourage you a lot. Take hold of some of these things. And by that, I don't mean go and grab a big whopping armful and struggle to carry it all. You can start small. You can start with small ideas that you think you want to change. And then either if you have the impetus to do it for yourself, amazing. If you have to reach out to a therapist, amazing. Maybe you need a support group. But it's always the smaller steps that help us in these wellness journeys. Trust me, I did not go from not moving to doing a high intensity class in one day. It actually took 8 years. So before I even thought about taking one, let alone teaching one. So start to take some of the small steps. How is your mental health? Do you know the different things that affect you? I know one of the things I used to do in my winter-based classes, because we live in Michigan, and in January, we get between 4 and 6 days of sun out of a month of 31. I used to ask my classes, what foods around you have vitamin D? To have them think about, we're not going to change the gray skies in Michigan unless you decide to move, but you can change what you put into your body to help you cope with having a lack of sun. So it's some of these small steps that we take toward mental health, checking in with each other, checking in with ourselves, making sure that if something is going to happen with our mental health journey, that we have a toolkit that we can use for it. Next slide, please. Mindfulness. This is the other aspect that people know a lot, or people who know me know I speak a lot about, is mindfulness. Part of that is because I teach yoga, and so mindfulness is very wrapped into it. The bigger part of it is that I have been a meditation specialist for the last 25 years. And meditation entered my life as a freshman in college. I went to Eastern Michigan for my undergrad, and I went from having my family to them being an hour away. And fortunately for me, I was taking a yoga class, and the teacher's like, we're going to do this meditation and mindfulness group. Would you like to come? And I said, sure. Had no idea what I was getting in for. One thing I do like to clear up immediately is that mindfulness and meditation are two very different things. Meditation is one state where you are sitting quietly, bringing your viewpoint inside, reflecting, introspecting about you, yourself, and you, and really working toward calming down your mind, bringing down your nervous system. Mindfulness can look very, very different. A lot of times people conflate mindfulness with meditation. Meditation is a part. But when I talk about mindfulness, the first question I ask people is, when you broke your fast, so when you had your first meal of the day, what was the texture? Not what did you eat, but what was the texture? Did you actually sit and pay attention to your food? Did you stop and sit down and have your food, or were you racing out the door to eat in the car as you drove to work? One of the things that we have learned to ignore because we're on the run is sitting down and being mindful over a meal. I know in my house, if we're having dinner together, we have a no electronics policy. Put them away. I want to talk to you. I want to see what you're doing. I want to hear how your day was. So mindfulness is actually tapping in to whatever it is you are doing in that moment. So for me here, being mindfulness is making sure that I'm speaking slowly enough so people can understand me, because when I get excited, I tend to get really rapid with my pace. Being mindfulness is noticing the chair that I'm sitting under or sitting on. It's underneath me. Being mindfulness is noting every single time that my glasses slip down my nose and I have to push them back up because I haven't gotten them fixed yet. So it's not a nervous tick, it's just slight. Why is mindfulness important to us? You should be mindful in life. Being mindful allows you to enjoy your life, enjoy the things around you. Stop and smell the flowers was a phase of it. But if you're not mindful when you're with your friends, if you're on your phone, are you actually with your friends? Are you paying attention to these people that are in your life that you enjoy? Are you having authentic conversations? Don't get me wrong. I love a good text chain. I love having a great texting group. What we love better is when we meet up for lunch and then all six of us are talking over each other. We're having conversations crisscross the table. We're engaging, we're interacting. Because we've noted that that social aspect of us being together cannot be replicated in a text message. It can't. The other thing about being mindfulness is really sitting and being present with what you are doing. I often lead off with food because most people eat every day. But things that you have an intention when you journal, are you being mindful to what is being put down? Are you acknowledging the feelings you have? When you are perhaps in your 20th Zoom meeting for the day, are you tapped into what's actually going on? Are you being in that space? Next slide, please. So as we go through, I'm going to show you just a couple of different methods for mindful breathing. Why do I do mindful breathing first? Because we all have to breathe. Every single one of us. And it's something that we do that people don't look at us like we're crazy because we do it, because they're doing it too. But there are quite a few different techniques when it comes to breathing. So I'm going to show you 3 today that you can take with you. There are hundreds more online. These 3 that I come with are the ones that I like to use the most because it calms me down. It brings my stress levels down. It gets me out of the back of my head where all the cortisol and stress lives, and it comes towards the front of your head where your thinking brain is one more time. So they're techniques that I use, techniques I give to students. So this first mindful breathing is a 4, a 7, and a 5. So 4 seconds of breathing in through your nose. You're going to lift your collarbone as you breathe in. Your belly should round out. If your belly rounds out, you're using your diaphragm. That is the goal. So after you breathe in for 4 seconds, you're going to hold your breath for 7 seconds. Most people can hold their breath for 7 seconds. If not, it's something you probably want to work up to. After you hold your breath for 7 seconds, you're going to exhale through your nose for 5 seconds. So I'm going to do it a couple of times with you. So just indulge me, those watching the video. So inhale for a good full 4 seconds. Hold your breath for 7. Exhale for 5. Let's do it together one more time. So inhale for 4. Hold your breath for 7. And exhale for 5. You can either stay with that breath pattern as I talk or resume your natural breathing. That is the majority of people's breath pattern as they sleep. So it's something we do. So if you're thinking holding your breath is crazy, we actually do it in the evening. As our body calms down, as our body is going into rest mode, as our brain patterns calm down, our breathing changes. So you do pause, you do hold your breath as you sleep. That pause tells your brain, we're shutting down for the night, we're about to have some rest, and it allows your body to relax just a little bit more. So it's one of the natural breath patterns that I like to work with because our bodies do it every evening. It's not as foreign to your body as it is to maybe your waking brain right now. If you've never heard that pattern, if you've never experienced it, that's one of the first aspects of mindful breathing that I like to bring. Will it help you fall asleep immediately? Depends on you and your brain. It does not make me fall asleep as I'm still here talking to you, but it is one that does allow my body to relax. So if I notice I'm getting very upset and tense in situations, I know that's a breath pattern that I can do. So far, no one's ever looked at me and said, oh my gosh, you're doing that sleep breathing pattern, please stop it. That's never happened. So I'm pretty sure it's kind of invisible to others, but it is one tool to use. Next slide, please. So for this one, it's called box breathing. Please breathe along with the box pattern. Box breathing is not new. It's not new. It's actually hundreds of years old from what I have been able to research and find. However, I learned about it from my military students. So I worked with American Military University, and we're talking about different mindfulness things because I bring it into my classrooms. And it was a couple of my students that were in the Navy that said, hey, we do that. It's box breathing. And so I learned that it is a technique that is taught to them to also help them calm down, to help them regulate themselves. And you'll notice again that with box breathing, there is that pause where we hold our breath, and it helps our nervous system calm down. This one in particular is a breath style that I brought into my classrooms and taught to my students for them to use before a major project or test. And what they learned is I calm down when I do this. And so, despite the fact that I teach writing, it is a tool that I gave to my students, because when you can control your breathing and your stress comes down, your emotions are better to regulate. You feel better in social situations, and it helps with your mental being, your mental well-being. So again, I teach breathing techniques because we have to breathe. It's something we absolutely have to do. So now you've had two different ones. You have the nighttime or sleep breathing, and then box breathing, which is just a different way to calm you down. And in case people have the question that I will just answer preemptively, yes, there are breathing patterns that help wake you up or help bring you energy and adrenaline. That's the flip side. They do it. They are, I'm stumbling over words, apologize for the human moment. Anyhow, these breathing techniques are some of the techniques that I bring to my yoga students when we're teaching them about breath, because with yoga, breath and movement are supposed to be symbiotic. They are supposed to work together. So if we're doing a particularly vigorous yoga flow, you're not going to do a very calm box breath. You're going to want something that we call fire breath, because it heats you up, it gets you moving and ready to move. We're going to go through one more breath pattern. This one's a little bit shorter. And this one, contrary to the other two, does not have a pause. But what you want to do as you prep for this breath is, when you breathe in, you're going to find your collarbones. Put your hands up on your collarbones. As you breathe in, you should feel your fingers rise on your collarbones if you are breathing in deep enough. You want to use your diaphragm. What happens when we get on the go or nervous or otherwise not paying attention? We start to breathe shallowly, which means we don't get to the bottom of our diaphragm. How can you tell if you're at your diaphragm? Your belly will round out. It's supposed to. I know that high fashion would tell us that we want to have the flattest stomach on the earth. However, when we are taking a nice deep breath, we want it to round out. And then as you exhale, you're going to sigh out of your mouth, just long breath out, and pull your belly button in toward your spine. And that will engage your core muscles and maybe push out a little bit of stale air out of your lungs. So next slide, please. As the triangle grows, breathe in. As it collapses, breathe out. As you've gone through the different patterns of breathing, one more encouragement from me. Maybe pick the one that you liked the best, the one that felt best in your body if you practiced it. How about do it mindfully every day at the same time for just 1 week and see what kind of difference it makes for you. I would also encourage you the same about journaling. Maybe you decide to journal for 10 minutes every night before you go to bed for 1 week and see how you feel. And then you can journal if you have no idea what to journal about. Let me help you one more time. How about an aspect of wellness that we've covered? There are, like I said, 8 dimensions of wellness. You can pick any one of them, but start to bring attention to the things that you are going through, the things that you are experiencing. Next slide, please. So I have my little graphic, and I love my graphics. Here are things that you can be mindful about that people don't necessarily pay attention to. A lot of times when you are going into these aspects and you're being mindful about things, it's usually about, am I on time for an appointment or work? Do I have the necessary items with me? So I'm going to encourage you to be mindful about different things. Be mindful about how you breathe, maybe just for 1 minute. How about be mindful about your eye movements? And I know that sounds weird for some people, but if you are predisposed to looking at a screen all day, whether it's a computer monitor or your phone screen, you might not realize how strained your eye muscles are getting from that. So pay attention to eye movements. Another thing to pay attention to that I find interesting is walking. When you're walking, do you roll toe to heel or do you roll heel to toe? And does that change depending on your footwear or if you're barefoot? So mindfulness is not this big magical mystical thing that only other people can guide you through. Mindfulness literally requires you to pay attention to what's happening around you. Not only just what's happening around you, but how does it impact you? So going back to walking, if you notice that normally you walk toe to heel and you try to walk heel to toe, does it feel better? Is there something that you're not quite paying attention to when you walk that's changing how you walk and how you feel when you walk? Again, for food, do you notice the textures of your food? Do you notice the spices? Do you notice the taste? Because every chef that I've ever had the joy to work with or collaborate with tells me savor your food. Don't just eat, savor the taste, savor the experience. And of course, it's a lot easier when you have a chef cooking for you because that is their wheelhouse and they do really well. But it doesn't mean that you can't go home and actually savor a meal that you put time and effort into creating. So don't think mindfulness are a bunch of unattainable practices. There are plenty that you can engage with and do. Next slide, please. Did you know? So coming on the heels of rounding everything out. So I'm going to give you the long story that is none of the text that's written on the slide, so you have plenty of time to read it. But a couple of years ago, Dr. Beverly was offering student success grants for anybody who had a good idea, write it down, maybe you'll get a student success grant and engage with your project. So I said, great, I'm going to do it. And so I wrote an application to bring meditative journaling and yoga open for 25 students free of charge. And the grant would pay for their journal and their yoga mat. And I had 25 students sign up. And we ran class Monday and Wednesday from 3 to 4 from the third week of winter semester until a week before finals. And students showed up. It was voluntary. They came in, we would do a good half hour of yoga, and then we would do a half hour of meditative journaling. And as the class progressed, only 3 people dropped. And that was due to other things happening in their life. And when we got done with that semester, I asked them each to write a 1-page reflection. How did this class help you? Or it wasn't a class. But the feedback was overwhelming. They're like, I'm sad that it ended before finals. I think it would have actually helped me calm down before finals. I heard a lot of people saying, I didn't know that breath and movement like this could affect me so positively. People really enjoyed the meditative journaling. We did it in quiet. Nobody read their entries. Everybody just sat in a communal group and wrote. And the feedback from that was it helped them organize their thoughts. It helped them brain dump some things that they wanted out of their heads. And we had a conversation about it. So when I met with Dr. Beverly again to give her the results, I said, I think this is something we should do. We should be offering different types of services. Um, and she said, okay, go research it. And so I did. And what I found out, which I was surprised I hadn't learned, is that through the Crim Foundation, there was a grant received. There was a nationwide movement to create the first mindfulness cities across the United States. So it was Boston, Massachusetts, it was Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles, California. I am missing one, but number 5 was Flint, Michigan. So our sweet little town is one of the first mindfulness cities in the country, and their grant goes until 2028, I believe. So armed with that knowledge, I took it back to Dr. Beverly and said, well, if Flint's going to be the first mindfulness city, can Mott be the first mindfulness campus? Next slide, please. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce the fact that I put not introducing the fact that I put a proposal together. I put a proposal together and introducing the fact that it was passed. So Mott Hole will start on campus January of 2025. And its whole goal is to bring campus community back together in a meaningful way through this wellness initiative. So plenty of details will be coming. There's a lot of really great things that are going to be happening, but understand that when we look at our campus and our wellness, our college leadership is behind us. They signed off on this program. They gave full support for this program. Some of the ideas including are being able to use Durham Wellness Center, having wellness classes at Durham, bringing some meditation groups to campus, and quite a few other amazing things. So yes, we take wellness seriously here at Mott. We take the ability for you to be an individual who has access to mental health services and other wellness services just as seriously. So I thank HR very much, Sarah Meyer reaching out to me and saying, hey, would you like to speak about wellness? And I said, boy, do I ever. And I appreciate our ASL interpreters, Stacy and Teresa. Thank you for providing the interpretations, translations for me. And then amazing thank you to our Mott leadership and definitely to our AV crew for keeping us up and running and all their amazing work. So my name's Jennifer. If you have questions, again, ctl@mcc.edu. I will be happy to answer them. Thank you so very much for giving me a space to talk about my passions.
Thank you so much. We don't have any questions at this time. I will wait a few minutes before we end the bear pause. It doesn't look like we have any questions that are coming through the chat. So I appreciate you coming and talking to us. We do have one question, if employees can reach out to you.
Yes. Please feel free. Again, the email address is ctl@mcc.edu.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining the August Bear Pause, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.